So in this segment, we're going to be talking about the Brexit checks kicking in. And I know I'm very late to the party in this one, but I thought it's just worth mentioning, especially since we cover Brexit a lot on this channel anyway. So why not? And might as well get my take on things, even though it's late. But yeah, British businesses worried about these import checks. This is going to be a complete disaster.
British businesses facing increased costs. The rules are meant to protect biosecurity and diversity and will impact flowers, cheese and dairy products as well as meat and fish. Our business correspondent Paul Kelso has more.
Winter blooms under the lights in a vast greenhouse near Amsterdam. This is the heart of the European flower trade, a market worth €9 billion a year to the Netherlands, almost $1 billion of which comes from the UK. But for wholesalers like Hemskirk, the introduction of long-delayed Brexit checks at the UK border mean it's about to get more difficult and more expensive to do business.
So it is 100% checked, then it's coming to us. We check it now again.
And now someone comes to check it
goes in the truck, we have to check it again, and then in the UK, we check it again. But it's making an awful lot of costs, and somebody has to pay the bill at the end of the day.
I don't know why. I know I mentioned it during my stream, but the Dutch accent, there's something glorious about it. I can't tell. It's such a strange accent. I love it.
So I'm 100% sure that the last customer, the British consumer, has to pay for this.
He's not wrong. At the end of the day, it's the consumer who pays for it. That's all that will happen, and it's going to push inflation way up again.
January the 31st, animal and plant products from the EU considered at medium risk of carrying pests or disease, including some flowers, milk, cheese and chilled or frozen meat and fish, will need a health certificate. From April the 30th, physical checks will be required on the same goods at the UK border.
And so you ought to think that for small quantities, it's going to be impossible to export this stuff. And they're going to face a lot of the problems that British exports face, which is if you send stuff in one lorry, for example, if you sell a load of different goods in one lorry, for example, if you're a bunch of different sellers, if one of them gets sent back, they all get sent back. If one of them gets stuck, they all get stuck, things like that. When it comes to, these flowers, I don't know how much experience. The question is, how much experience do these exporters have with dealing with third countries? Which I don't know if they've got a ton of that. And the other problem is going to be, how quick is that border going to be? Essentially the Calais-Dover crossing. How fast are goods going to move across that border? It's very concerning.
Among the species now considered a risk to Britain's biosecurity, these orchids, planted before the Brexit vote and painstakingly raised to peak next month.
And, these are flowers that require a lot of care, and they use dyes, I think, to get it to this colour.
These orchids are ready to be harvested for Valentine's Day, but by the time they get to the UK, for the first time in decades, they will face border controls first, paperwork, in due course, physical inspection. Now, these measures have already been delayed 5 times, but now they're here.
I'm very surprised that Sunak has committed to these measures. Honestly, I'm shocked. They talk about cheese here, but when it comes to these flowers, they don't have the longest shelf life anyways. Oh yeah, thank you for Twitter or X for being absolute trash.
British businesses.
Margerie has been importing cheese from across Europe.
And reloading vehicles, redistributing orders. If we experience a 4-hour delay, that's going to dramatically change our business model. It only takes a small mistake for it to have a potentially catastrophic effect, particularly in the lead up to Valentine's.
The other problem you've got is that, lorry drivers that are coming from the EU, they face a long wait from going from Dover to Calais. Now they're going to face much longer wait going from Calais to Dover. And so how many of them are actually going to be willing to do that? That's my other concern.
What you'll not have anymore.
The British food industry thinks the changes stink too. La Fromagerie has been importing cheese from across Europe for more than 40 years. Now a vet certificate will be required for every shipment from every supplier.
Yep, so if you're doing small consignments again, it's going to require health certificates. Very expensive. Cheshire Cheese Man learnt this the hard way. He moved to France. With a lot of these companies, the question is the UK going to be worth it? Because we're a much smaller market than the EU. So, in terms of these consignments here, are they going to be worth shipping over, considering they require a health certificate, which is quite expensive?
Which means some may stop altogether.
We deal with, 1 or 2 guys in a dairy with 50 sheep. Do they want to be paying for this new certificate to send to us? I assure you that most of them will say no.
And that's the reality of the situation. I'm very surprised the government are actually going through the checks this time. I thought this was a clear hospital pass to Labour. Very strange. ITV did some reporting on it as well, where they talked about the Brexit rules and stuff like that. So I don't think we need to bother going over this clip, but this is being widely reported out and it's being attributed to Brexit, which is important because these are as a result of Brexit. The new border controls will leave British consumers and businesses facing £500 million in increased checks and possible delays. We still don't know if we have the staff to deal with these checks. Michael Gove a few years ago talked about 50,000 custom officers. The need for 50,000 custom officers is nuts. It costs an enormous amount of money to get that amount as well. And even then, I don't think we've got enough, anywhere near enough. It's absolutely terrifying. But yeah, the genius here, Jacob Rees-Mogg, saying there's nothing to be fearful of about leaving on WTO terms, where fresh food will be checked coming from the EU. And he was, to be fair though, he was a fan of just getting rid of the vast majority of checks from most countries. So, I guess that's what he would argue. He would argue we don't need to do these checks because they're coming from the EU, even though, you've got WTO rules on most favourable nations and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know how that would work in the WTO rules. Yeah, someone could take us to the WTO, but at the same time, given the lack of judges, I don't know how much of that concern that's actually going to be. But it's possible we could get taken to the WTO courts over it if we're treating nations very differently to each other. But yeah, how is the WTO Brexit working out for people? I wonder. I do want to talk to some Brexiteers about it. And you've got, the Daily Express, vote leave today, make Britain even greater. And now they're talking about France's visa hell as Brits forced to sell their homes over crazy EU rules, even though these are WTO rules. Once again, the Express don't know the difference between EU rules and WTO rules. Does that surprise anyone? No. And again, Jacob Rees-Mogg tweeting that this is really stupid for us to do these kind of further import checks. The same Mogg banging the drum for the WTO Brexit. I mean, this guy's proved to be an absolute fraud. I hope they do ask him about biosecurity and other things, but given that he's a big fan of just importing all the food that we eat rather than supporting British farms, sustainability and food security and food safety, I do wonder what kind of border would he want. And I think that's what we should talk about, because I know he talks about an all-digital border and all this stuff. But, this is a recipe for inviting in all sorts of foodborne illnesses that would wreak havoc on this country. And you also block a lot of our exports as well, because countries won't want to deal with a plague island. But anyways, let me leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.